So as a chief information security officer, how do you wade through all the new tech, all the new products, all the new vendors, and really make sure you're focusing in on the key things they need to be focused in on? So what I was going to do on this podcast is go over what are some of the key trends, some of the key areas that if you're a CISO, you want to make sure you're keeping a pulse on, you understand, you recognize what's happening and what's going on in that arena. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome. You know what time it is, my friends? It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. Dr. E is in the house. Now, one of the most challenging jobs for a Chief Information Security Officer is to stay up on all the trends, all the buzzwords, all the new tech, and everything that's coming out. If you've gone to recent events like RSA or any security conferences or things like that, cybersecurity is one of the hot areas for startups. There's new products, there's new tech, there's new claims, right? It is coming out left and right, and it's coming at you full force. So as a Chief Information Security Officer, how do you wade through all the new tech, all the new products, all the new vendors, and really make sure you're focusing in on the key things they need to be focused in on? So what I was going to do on this podcast is go over what are some of the key trends, some of the key areas that if you're a CISO, you want to make sure you're keeping a pulse on, you understand, you recognize what's happening and what's going on in that arena. The first one, of course, that needs no introduction, and if you haven't had a briefing on it with your execs, you definitely should, and that, of course, is AI or artificial intelligence. Now, to me, AI is really split into two areas, not both necessarily falling under cybersecurity. The one area is, of course, advanced attack vectors. We always knew phishing attacks are problematic, and the big issue with phishing, the more real they look, the more likely somebody is to click on them. And I still remember, just nostalgic moment, right? If we go back to the 90s, I remember when the I Love You virus came out, and it's 2 a.m, and I'm sitting here in the data center at one of the telecoms that I was the chief security officer for, and I'm looking at what happened, and I look at one of the engineers and I go, wasn't this obvious? And they say, what do you mean? I go, people came in the morning and they saw an email from a coworker or somebody in the organization that they might or might not have known with a subject line that said, I love you. Unless you work for a really weird organization, that shouldn't be normal activity. I don't know about you. I care about my employees. I care about my customers. But I don't wake up on Tuesday and go, oh, it's Appreciation Day. I need to go and tell all my customers that I love them and how much I care for them, right? Not happening. It's weird, right? It's not something that's normal. So I'm sitting there going, people knew that this wasn't legit. People knew that there was something off, yet they still clicked on it. And I looked at them and I said, what happens when it looks real? And we have got to that point about 2-3 years ago where it got pretty close to real, where they're taking the templates from actual mailing services or e-commerce sites or others in which you get regular notifications about packages and deliveries and things like that, and they are essentially replicating those to look just like real messages. Well, what AI does is AI takes it up to the next level. Because now as an attacker, if you work for a large company and your executives are pretty public and put out a lot of information and a lot of data, you could go in to any of your favorite AI tools and say, generate a corporate memo as if it was written from Eric Cole of Secure Anchor. And then you could go in and find out email addresses of employees and easily send out an email that essentially is legit. So to me, AI is the straw that broke the camel's back from a CISO standpoint that says awareness is not enough. Prior to AI, awareness is how we dealt with phishing. Awareness is how we dealt with these different attacks, and don't click unless you know. Lots of awareness, lots of information, really educating our workforce. But the reality now is that no longer works, because awareness is all about make sure it's legit. Well, the problem with AI is it's legit, right? It's pretty much written from the same person of a legit one. So it's almost impossible for somebody to tell the difference, which means awareness is always good. I'm not saying we shouldn't do awareness, but we're at the point where we need more. And to me, this is the point from a CISO, 2024, 2025, going into 2026. This is the years where basically we have to go back to fundamentals going, wait a second. Email was meant for email. Email was never meant for all this fancy-dancy embedded links, attachments, file transfers, and all this other crazy mumbo-jumbo that we now include within it. That's just not what it was intended for. So we're going to go back and go to our traditional plain text emails external. No embedded links, no attachments, keep it simple. And the crazy part is, it really, if we do it just externally, for external-based emails, the impact to companies is really minimal. Here's the problem, though, that CISOs need to be aware of. There's this crazy thing. If people don't know they have something, or they have something and they don't use it, or they have something and it's not really important to them, they won't say anything. But as soon as you try to take it away, my friends, as soon as you try to take it away, they will freak out. They will go crazy. They will go nuts, and it will be like you committed the crime of the century. So the problem is here, not that it's impactful to the organization, but when you go in and start saying, we're going to take this feature away, people get nuts. I'll give you a quick example. I was at a company where they were getting hit with phishing attacks left and right. I mean, they were getting a couple $100K here, couple $100K here, a mil here, there. And I mean, it was impacting the business. They were losing about $25 to $30 million in cyber attacks, ransom, all sorts of craziness every single year. And they were in a board meeting. They asked me to come in, present options. And I'm like, this is real simple, my friends. For external-based email, we go back to email. No bells and whistles, no fancy, dancy, anything else. We go back to email. Well, you would have thought I was kidnapping puppies. I mean, they were freaking out. You can't do that. That'll paralyze the business. Blah, blah. And I'm like, we did the research. It's not a big deal. Freaked out. Totally freaked out. So after the meeting, the CEO said, Eric, stay behind. He goes, I understand my comrades and how they feel. They're not in charge. I am. How confident are you that if we do what you said, it would greatly reduce the attacks and have minimal impact on the business? Highly confident, sir. Highly confident. So he looked at me and said, do it, but don't tell anyone. You sure? He said, yep, do it. So we did it. Guess what happened? Miracle. The attacks pretty much disappeared. No more attacks. And zero impact to the business. So here's the fun part. I come back a quarter later, because they're quarterly meetings, so 3 months later, and the executive's like, hey, just want to let you know that our number of phishes, our number of impact to cybersecurity is down significantly. We've had almost no attacks, no issues or anything else. And they're all starting to look at me like, see, we told you we didn't need to do your thing. And he's like, well, but before you go after Dr. Cole, I'd like him to tell you a story. And I'm like, you sure? I said, yes. So I told him, I said, listen, after the meeting, the CEO told me to do it. So for the last 90 days, all attachments, embedded links, all associated with malicious activity was no longer allowed from the internet. And not a single one of you noticed or a single one of you complained. It was sort of like this deadpan, like they didn't know how to respond, like they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar. All right, so the reality is, with the advancement of AI attacks, embedded links and attachments is no longer acceptable for external emails. The second area that's big, depending on your business, plagiarism. If you think about what AI is plagiarism in its purest form. AI, artificial intelligence, it is being trained on legitimate data set. So if you're saying, write me a 3-page white paper as if Dr. Eric Cole wrote it, what is it going to do? It's going to take all my books, all my papers and everything I've written, tens of thousands of pages of information that I've written over the years, and it's going to take all of that, correlate it, analyze it, and basically produce content. I don't know your definition of plagiarism, right? That sounds pretty darn close, right? You're taking somebody's work and reusing it without their permission. So you got to be real careful of the rules of, can you use AI in your job? Because we've seen this pop up so many times where people who are tasked to write papers or write press releases or write reports for clients or do research or things like that, what used to take them 200 or 300 hours, they're now getting done in 2 to 3 hours because they're just having AI generate. It looks good, it sounds good, but is it valid as legit? And is it or is not plagiarism? So that's something where sometimes they put that under HR, sometimes they'll put that in a different area, but the question is, somebody needs to be dealing with policies on when, where, and how can employees use AI in the company or not. Because if not, they're going to use it, and it's going to get out of hand before you realize it. So that's sort of the first area, AI, and there's 2 different areas you want to look at. Next one that you have to be really focused on as a CISO is regulation. The United States is still in this weird spot where they don't really have a federal data privacy plan for the United States. They have little pieces here and there, but it's really a lot of California. New York is now getting in the game, and these different states. So depending on where your customers are, where your employees are located, what information you have, what data you have, how you're using it, how you're gathering it and harvesting it, you have to make sure that you're really careful with the new laws and regulations. Now, are we saying that cybersecurity professionals need to become attorneys? No. On a side note, if you're younger or you have kids or nieces or nephews, to me, if you're looking for a profession to get into, you're 16, 17, and you want a fun job where you basically can print money, cyber law, my friends, cyber law. That's where everything's going. Because if you think about it right now, there has to be international cyber laws. We have to create it. Most of our lives, most business transactions, most of what we're doing as a business is done on the internet, is done in cyberspace. Yet here's the problem. There's no cyber laws. So my question is, if I'm in the United States and I go in and access a website in Russia and my data transfers through Germany, which laws apply? Some, none, all, any, right? And they're all different and they're all unique And then when you get into what's happening with cyber attacks, where they're coming from countries in which there's no extradition treaty or it's not illegal, a lot of countries say, hey, you hack in the country, you're going to jail. You hack outside the country, we don't care. So it's technically, if you're in country X and you hack country Y, it's not illegal. So we have all these complexities and issues. And what's happening with a lot of these cyber crimes is regardless. I mean, I work US, Europe, Middle East, Australia, across the board, and it's the same problem where finding them is easy. We can find them, we can locate them, I can tell you where they are. I can often give you street addresses. Problem is, they're smart enough that they're often launching the attacks in countries that don't have extradition treaties with the, I don't know why my cough, man, it was good for a while and then it's starting back up, but guess what? I'm like the Postal Service. Neither rain nor sleet nor snow nor hail will stop me from my appointed rounds. I'm going. So we're recording right now. Hopefully overlook the coughing, but we'll rock and roll, my friends. So like, the problem is they're smart. And this is what makes cybercrime so hard. Traditional crime is usually committed by lower IQ people. I mean, somebody who's going to walk in to a store or a bank or somewhere else with a gun and rob the cashier typically isn't the most, what's the nice way of saying? The smartest in the group, right? Because that's not a smart thing to do, right? There's much better, easier ways, right? If you want to make money, it's just not a smart activity. So therefore, because it's a low-tech, low thought out crime, it's usually easier and quicker to catch them and they make more mistakes. Cybercrime typically tends to be much more higher end, sophisticated, educated folks that think out their attack. They know the laws, they know the regulations, they know extradition treaties, and they know what is and is not legal and illegal, and they perfectly plan their attack. So essentially, it's not illegal from where they're sitting, and you can't extradite them even if you catch them. So this is going to become a big area, and the new laws at a state level, if you're in the United States, are rapidly changing. The privacy laws and cybersecurity laws overseas are also changing. So this is something where we don't expect cyber folks to become attorneys, but you do have to have a relationship with your attorneys. You should work with chief legal counsel periodically to say, hey, hearing about any new laws, or what do you think of this law or that law or these, and just have a conversation with some of our larger clients. They actually have on reporting to the CISO, they actually have a lawyer that's either part-time or full-time, not under chief legal counsel, not dealing with the other, but dealing solely with internet cyber laws, regulations, extortions, ransomware, and all those other attack vectors that are out there that are negatively impacting companies. So that's something as a CISO, you want to keep a pulse on who is monitoring, who is tracking, who is aware of the new regulations. Because here's the craziest thing, my friends. If you're not aware of a law, you can still be held liable. So if they pass a new law that says you can't do X, and your company is doing X, regardless of whether you did or didn't know about it, you should have, and you could still be held liable. And that makes sense at one level, because think about it. What if I'm driving down the street, my sports car, I'm going a little fast because it's a beautiful day, the top is down, and I get pulled over. And the officer says, sir, do you know what the speed limit is? I say, nope, I have no idea. Whenever I was getting close to the speed limit sign, I purposely looked the other way. I have no idea what the speed limit is. I'm like, okay, I guess because you're not aware of the law, I can't give you a ticket. Right? That would be, well, I guess depending on which side, that could or could not be beautiful, right? But that's not how it works. They're going to be like, guess what? If you drive a car, you should know how to find speed limit signs. You should be aware of the speed limit, and you're still going to get a ticket whether you knew about it or not. So this is one where I see companies get themselves into a lot of trouble. Biggest area is in data retention. I see a lot of companies when they have an incident or an attack or something happens across the organization, or there's legal action taken against them, and somebody comes in and says, okay, preserve your logs or give me your logs or share your logs with me, and they don't have them. And in some industries, there's actually laws on log retention. So now all of a sudden, you think everything is great, but there was a law that said you needed to keep these logs for 7 years. You had no idea about the law and nobody told you. You're only keeping your logs for a year. And now, not only do you have either an attack or lawsuit, but now you have additional potential criminal legal action against your company for violating regulations on log retention. So log retention, logging, backups, all those things are critical that you get legal help and expertise on time, details, and how to handle that. The next one, which is sort of related to laws, is sort of regulation, standards, compliance. There's so many new compliance standards coming out. There's this standard and that standard, and I hear all the time, well, what standard are we using? It really isn't about the standard. It's about having a robust methodology. So do you have a standard reproducible methodology that's aligned with your industry on how you implement, manage and run your cybersecurity program? This is also becoming a big area, especially if you're publicly traded. Publicly traded companies have to get audited. They have to get verified and validated. They actually have to meet certain compliance standards and regulations. So if you're not fully following them, that could get you into trouble. Also, if your company is switching or acquiring other companies. I've seen this one where a company was a private company and they acquired a public company. Once again, I'm not an expert on all the business law and all those other areas, but evidently there's situations where if you acquire a public company and the way you integrate it, essentially you now are bound by all of the regulations of publicly traded companies for your entire business. So there's all these different issues there. So if you're acquiring companies or selling companies, or your company was once private and now public, there's a whole set of regulations, compliance, and other issues that you as a CISO need to be aware of and need to understand. To me, probably one of the biggest, just because it's getting a lot of traction in executive space, and it actually is good common knowledge. I mean, I joke we've been doing what they call zero trust for many, many years. We just didn't call it zero trust, right? But zero trust. I see a lot of execs in meetings go, are we zero trust compliant? Are we zero trust certified? And it's like, well, there is no compliance or certification, but are we implementing or rolling out zero trust strategies in our organization? And to me, zero trust is pretty simple. It's good, old-fashioned cybersecurity that I've been teaching since the late 90s when I wrote my first cybersecurity class, and I taught for over 18 years. And it's essentially create your environment, your computers, your network, and your data in such a way that if any one asset gets compromised, it won't allow it to compromise any other asset. So zero trust, here's a few areas for CISOs to think about. Zero trust on your clients. If somebody's running a browser and they go to a bad website and get a drive-by download, it should be contained to that browser. It shouldn't spread to any other areas of their system. And this is one where you can go in and there's many different techniques that implement this. You can use sandboxing techniques, isolation, containers, right? Lots of different tech out there for doing it, but that's probably one of the best methods for protecting your endpoints because that's where most attacks start. Most attacks are going to start with a phish to the client, click on a link, compromise the email client, compromise the network, compromise the servers, compromise the data, game over. Zero trust is basically saying, well, if I compromise the email client, it should be contained to the email client. Then, if my desktop gets compromised, it should be contained to the desktop. Then if the VLAN that it's on gets compromised, it should be contained to the VLAN. then if a server gets compromised, it should be, and you sort of get the idea, but it's multiple layers of protection where that if any single component or entity gets compromised, it's contained, reduced, controlled, and can't easily spread across the network. Because that's really the problem with attacks today. The problem with attacks today is the speed in which they can go and do lateral movement within an environment, set up pivot points, far outweighs the capacity of some companies to detect it. So if I can compromise a client and I can be on your server exfiltrating data in 37 seconds, yet it takes you hours or a day to review the logs, review the alerts, go back to it, and all those other things, that's problematic. So you want to make sure that you realize that today's speed of attacks have increased exponentially, that we need to realize that detection is always there, it's always a must, but it's becoming harder and harder, and we need to put more effort and energy in to other potential measures. Now, we'll never be able to prevent all attacks, but we do want to make sure that we can contain and control our environment as much as possible. The other area that CISOs have to be aware of is what I call cyber numbness. And this is one that I'm seeing happen in more and more companies is if you don't have an attack, if you don't have a breach, if you don't have an incident for weeks, months, or years, then executives and even people within the company are like, we're good. We don't have to worry about cybersecurity. We don't have to keep spending money on it. We don't have to hire more people. We don't have to increase your budget. We don't have to do all these things because cyber's not really an issue. We haven't really had an attack. So if we haven't had an attack, it means what we're doing is working. And if what we're doing is working, then we're good. Two things that you know as a CISO you need to do, but many don't. One is a world-class CISO educates the execs on the amount and frequency of attacks that are occurring. If you are not reporting attempted attacks where they're attempting to break in but they're not successful because your firewall, your IPS or your DLP or whatever tech out there blocked it and stopped it, you are doing yourself a disservice. And this is the biggest problem I see. Most CISOs don't report any information up to the executive team. So the executive team is sitting there going, oh, we're good. No one's attacking us. We're not a target. Life is great. We solved the security problem. I hear this all the time with some execs like Eric. We're good. We haven't had any breaches or issues or incidents, and we basically solved cybersecurity. Top-notch team. World-class CISOs never, ever think that bragging about low or no attacks is a good thing. That is your kiss of death, my friends. Every organization is being attacked, every organization is a target, and every single organization on planet Earth is going to have an incident. So if you're that type that you think you're superheroes and that you can block every attack and that you'll never get compromised, not happening here. We will never get compromised, we'll never get broken into. You are fooling yourself, you're doing harm to the organization, and you're fooling the executives. Because these are the exact companies when they do get targeted and they do get compromised, the CISO gets fired. Right? You don't want to be that person. You don't want to be in that situation. So it's critical that you are constantly reminding the execs, hey, every week we have 3,000 to 4,000 attempted attacks. We're stopping them, we're detecting them, but guess what? One of them could get in. You need to recognize that breaches are inevitable and embrace the breach and not run away from it. The other thing that's super important is, even if it's true, which it's probably not, that you haven't had any attacks, it's just you're not raising the awareness with the execs, vectors are always changing. There's always new threats, always new issues, always new problems. So you need to go, just because you're safe today doesn't mean you're not going to be a target tomorrow. So world-class CISOs are constantly educating their executives, constantly making them aware of what the threats are, what the attempted attacks are, and making sure they know that breaches do happen and we are being attacked on a regular basis. These took longer than I thought, so this is going to be a multi-part series. So I still have a few more, so make sure you join me next week for part 2 of cyber trends every CISO must be aware of.